So I often encourage clients to like have a buddy on tour, someone that's your
Mhm.
person that you agree to be like their support if they need it and vice versa. We need to move away from this idea that taking care of your own needs is selfish. What's super interesting if you
Mm.
really dive into this stuff and learn about it is it's not actually an attention deficit problem.
Hello and welcome to the Noisemakers. My name is Liv Carter. I'll be your host today. Here with Rachel Sacharoff. She is a licensed therapist based in Stamford, Connecticut, and has a really great passion for working with folks who are neurodivergent. And we're going to talk about that specifically in the context of the music industry today. So, Rachel, if you're going to give us a little bit of a background on yourself and how you came to work with musicians.
Yeah, so I was a musician when I was younger. I was a songwriter and a singer for most of my like late adolescence into my early 20s, and I always have had a passion for live music. And throughout my life at different periods of time, I've sang in bands and written music and collaborated with people, and then became a mom and kind of put that on the back burner. When I was in my late 30s, I decided to go back to school to become a therapist. And when I entered into practice as a licensed clinician a couple years later, was around the same time that some stuff was going on in the jam band scene, which I'm like a part
Mm.
of. I'm a big Fish fan and a Grateful Dead fan. So, that's kind of always been my live music world. And I joined up with Backline, which is an organization that provides mental health services to the music industry. And then I started from
Hmm.
there working with their clients that they sent me who were musicians. So prior to that, I had also like artists and musicians. I've worked with actors and like artists, painters, sculptors, that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
music industry specifically started mostly when I joined up with Backline and started working with their clients, which has been super fun and engage really interesting work. Helping people figure out how to navigate, that kind of a lifestyle where you're out on the road, which I again had done with other clients of mine who were performers.
Hmm.
Um, but that part of my practice came about when I joined up with Backline. I'm a marriage and family therapist by trade, so most people think I just do couples therapy, but I prefer actually to work with individuals most of the time, unless the couple dynamic is related to neurodivergency in the couple. And in that
Right.
kind of an environment, I really like to work with those people. But I own a group practice in Connecticut. I've got a bunch of other marriage and family therapists that work under me, and we kind of like all work from this non-pathologizing lens where we don't believe that people have problems. We believe people experience problems that are like
Right.
based on the way they interact with the world around them. So it's like to us it's a more helpful lens, right? Like a strengths-based kind of lens. And that's how I
Yeah.
got into working with neurodivergency because if this is okay to keep going on, I like started in
Yeah. Yeah.
substance.
Please go.
Yeah, I started working in substance abuse right out of grad school, and then moved into trauma work, and then kind of found out about neurodivergency and how that was kind of related to both of those things and got really interested. And in the process of learning about that stuff, which became like my special interest, I figured out
Hmm.
that I was also neurodivergent, which I had an
Right.
inkling about for a really long time, but never concrete answers to. And so I kind of did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people, and figured out, oh, okay, that's why I really am interested in understanding this. Because that's like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
common
Yeah.
trait amongst neurodivergent people is they want to understand the why. Like, why do I feel this way? What's happening? Why? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's been my area of passion and interest over the last couple of years. My clinicians are all trained by me in that, so they're also neurodivergent affirming and they also have lived experience with it. So we really kind of try to present ourselves as this place where if you are questioning neurodivergence or you are neurodivergent and you just want a therapist that gets it and understands, like we're your people. And a lot of artists
Yeah.
and performers fall into that vat, right?
Yep.
So.
Yeah, the thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about sort of giving the background is you understand their world, right? Yes, you understand neurodivergence, but you also understand being on tour, recording records, writing songs, the creative process. You also
Yeah.
understand that piece because you did that yourself. And I wonder if that's that's often the missing piece for folks seeking, wanting to talk to somebody, is it's such a unique experience that you knowing what that's like has to be a part of their therapy.
Yeah, and I think that that was like Backline's whole idea when they formed, was that like we need people that
Right.
understand the pressures and the experience of this lifestyle. I never went out on tour as a singer-songwriter, but I definitely went into record labels and got, interviewed and pitched on like potentially signing. I definitely worked in recording studios. I've had music on
Right.
the radio, and I'm currently married to a drummer who does tour. So, having
Right.
that lived experience definitely helps. Um, and I think that goes without saying for therapy in general. Like if there's something specific to your life that impacts the way that you're experiencing the world, like having a therapist with that lived experience is super valuable. It's not
Yeah.
necessary, right? But it's very valuable. And the same kind of applies with neurodivergence. People who are experiencing neurodivergency, whether they have ADHD or they have autism or OCD or pretty much any different way of experiencing the world, having a
Yeah.
therapist that has that lived experience really bridges the gap of understanding and like allows for greater change to take place, you
Yeah,
know?
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So to kind of level set is for folks listening or
Yeah.
watching, if you're watching this on YouTube, is the it gets let's get some shared definitions, right? So
Sure.
there's because I think the and I saw something as I was kind of preparing for this conversation just the other day. The majority of information on TikTok about ADHD is misinformation. That's not great. So let's get some shared definitions.
Yeah.
Neurodivergent, neurotypical. Like how would you at a high level describe these?
So I would say that we are all humans are neurodiverse, right? Meaning we all have different
Okay.
ways of our nervous system working. It's kind of like biodiversity. It's like the same idea, right? Everybody's body is different, right? We all grow
Hmm.
up in this diet culture. It's like, oh, just eat cabbage and you'll lose 30 pounds. But like some people will eat cabbage and gain 30 pounds, right? It's like everybody's body
Right.
is different and the brain and the nervous system do not escape that, right? So neurodiversity is the term that is the that we are moving towards to kind of understand that everybody is different. So when we talk about neurodivergence or neurotypicality, that really points to like an older way of thinking about things. And it's more about like
Oh, okay.
neurotypical is a construct that there's some, just in the same way we say like a typical woman, like there is no actual typical woman, right? But
Right.
neurotypical, is pointing to this idea that there's a norm that like if you fall within a certain range of what's considered normal by someone else, I don't know, that
Arbitrary thing that somebody made
arbitrary,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and subjective, very subjective, because we all know that education impacts our perception of things, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, so neurotypical would be what's considered normal, right? Like just the general run of the mill person, if you will. Whereas
Right.
neurodivergent means that your nervous system in your brain works differently than what's considered typical.
Hmm.
And so, but the idea that we are all neurodiverse is kind of more of where we want to try to get to in terms of inclusivity and affirming kind of practices, because everybody is different. The thing that makes people neurodivergent to a place where it's difficult for them is when their differences are far outside, right, of what the general idea
Oh,
is.
okay. I see
So
where you're
there's this
going.
like
Yeah.
wonderful graphic that I actually have seen on TikTok, where it's like a web, kind of like circles and circles, kind of, and it like shows that like everybody has slight differences in perception, slight differences in
Hmm.
emotionality, slight differences in communication style, but those people fall within a range that still fits into that neurotypical space. Whereas people who are truly neurodivergent, their bar graphs in that circle kind of come outside of they're bigger, right? Their
Yeah.
differences in perception, their sensory differences, their communication differences, their emotional differences are bigger. And it like puts them in this place where maybe even to the naked eye or to like an individual person, like they seem different, right? So I think that When we
Yeah.
talk
That
about
makes sense.
neurodivergence, we talk about anybody whose brain and nervous system operates differently from what's considered typical. And that what's considered typical really depends on so many different things.
And
So
is
that,
it then also like it's when it flips, is the best way for me to understand this? Like if it flips into neurodivergent, is
Mhm.
if it impacts their quality of life.
Yeah, I would think that that's a pretty accurate statement. Yeah.
Okay.
But, and all the time, right? Where
Yeah,
like,
yeah, not like a one-off, like I'm
right.
going through a one hard thing, but like
Right.
where it's continuous, you just have your needs are different enough
Hmm.
that, it's going to show up if you hold on a job or,
Yeah.
whatever it is, like family relationship,
Yeah.
that it's harder for you because of these things.
Yeah.
Um, and again, obviously, I am by no means an expert on this, so I will probably ask some dumb questions. Let's
No, there's
preface
no
that.
dumb questions because the truth is nobody's really an expert on it, right? Like if we look at things like ADHD and autism as like the general
Yeah,
idea of what people think of when they think of neurodivergent, all of the research that was done on those two they're differences. I like to say that it's differences, not deficits, and we can talk about that
yeah,
later,
yeah,
but all the research that was done previously, like to the last 15 years, was done on white adolescent boys. So the
yeah.
idea of like what ADHD actually looks like or what autism actually looks like is really not correct in terms of the research. So talk about TikTok having misinformation. The actual research
The
that people
research is wrong
are
too.
like
Yeah,
diagnosing on is not accurate. And so in the
yeah,
last 15 years, 20 years, they've really been pushing for neurodivergent people to be heading the research, doing research on adults, doing research on women, right? There's
yeah.
a large percentage of girls and women who go through life not having this diagnosis, not knowing that they're neurodivergent in that way, because they just don't fit the criteria that's used to diagnose young boys, right? And never mind if you are of
Mm.
a different culture or a different race, like
Right, even
it,
worse then,
it's even
because you're
worse.
definitely
Yeah.
excluded. So
So,
it's that then brings me sort of what are some, and this is probably an exhaustive list, so you can sort of summarize the most common misunderstandings
oh,
about
well, the most
things like
yeah.
just neurodivergence in general, but also like specifically ADHD. Because I think my definition, honestly, is still whatever was going on in the 80s, if I'm honest. So kind of what are some of those common misunderstandings that you
I
see?
think the biggest misunderstanding is that you didn't do well in school if you had ADHD.
No,
Like
but that's
that
not
there's
true.
some sort of
Yeah.
cognitive problem. Or the other misconception is that you can't pay attention to things. What's super interesting if you
Mm.
really dive into this stuff and learn about it is it's not actually an attention deficit problem. That's not what's happening in people's brains who have ADHD. What's happening in their brains is their brains are capable of picking up a lot more stimuli at one time than someone who's neurotypical, right? So the
Hmm.
problem lies in knowing what you're supposed to be paying attention to. There's no deficit. It's like it's the opposite. It's actually
Oh,
an
that's
overload of
interesting.
information that comes in, and it's like, wait, what am I supposed to be paying attention to?
So it's the prioritization that's the
Mhm.
issue, not the
Not yeah,
attention
yeah.
by itself.
So it's not an attention deficit problem. The name of it is just ridiculous, right? But the most common misconception that I come across in my practice is people saying, yeah, but I did really well in school. Like I was a straight A student. I'm a perfectionist. I'm a type A. I'm a go-getter. I'm always like trying to do better, trying to do better. I'm like, yeah, that
Yeah, yeah.
that could be ADHD. Like one of the questions that I ask clients is like, do you feel like you're driven by a motor to do things like that? And that
Mm.
can manifest in someone who's also extremely bright in a top-notch straight A student, right? So this idea
Yeah.
that you have or that you were a problem in school, that you couldn't stay in your seat, right? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that's not really true either, especially with women. Women are really good at masking.
Well,
We're
because
really,
society tells us we have to, so.
yeah. And so when you are a neurodivergent female and you're experiencing social difficulties, right, growing up as a
Yeah.
child, you're very capable of masking in a way, right, where nobody's noticing that there's actually a larger issue going on for you.
Oh,
And
that's
then you couple
interesting.
that with like this go-getter driven type A perfectionist personality, and these women who like go, 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 mask, 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 mask. And then they
Yeah.
eventually at some point they hit a wall and they burn out. That's what having these kinds of issues undiagnosed does to people. It's like you get really anxious all the time because you have to mask all the time. You're trying to be normal all the time and it's
Right.
exhausting, So that's where like being like pursuing your passion and becoming an artist or a musician is actually a really good job for someone who's
I
neurodivergent.
was just thinking that as you said, like the go-getters and the people who are like, I was like, that sounds like musicians.
Yeah.
So when we move this into the world of musicians and actually really any creative person, like it
Hmm.
could be, like you said, you
Yeah.
also work with actors, is what are some of the unique challenges for them? Because it strikes me as I'm listening to you that some aspects of being neurodivergent are a plus for them, whereas
Yeah.
other ones might be not so great. So what are the unique challenges that they face?
Well, it depends on the person, right?
Mm,
The thing is, everybody's presentation of this stuff is different, very much in the same way, like I was saying with biodiversity, everybody's body is
right.
different. So the presentation is going to look different in everybody. Like, very few people have exactly the same type of presentation of ADHD or autism or OCD or chronic PTSD, right? There's anything that kind of changes your nerve or makes you have a different nervous system is still
Hmm.
considered, a neurodivergency. So
Yeah.
it really depends on the person, but because everybody's profiles are like spiky. And what I mean by that is like you said, being neurodivergent has challenges and it also has gifts. Kind of
Right.
nature's always dual, right? There's always the good and the bad. Like nothing's ever just one thing. So neurodivergency doesn't escape that idea, but people's needs are spiky, meaning they have different needs at different times in different places. And so their challenges and their gifts are going to be different. I would think that like who was I talking to? I always use this example when I talk to clients about this stuff, whether they're in the music industry or not. I love
Hmm.
live music, right? But I hate crowds. I don't like being around a lot of people. It
Mm.
stresses me out when like, especially like I used to live in New York City and I would walk around like this, like don't touch me, because people are bumping into you. And like, if my girlfriends are like, "Oh, we're going to the women's march, you should come with us." I'm like, "I'm gonna pass."
Yeah,
Those
not too many people.
too
Yeah.
many people. I don't like that. Makes me uncomfortable. So I try to avoid stuff like that.
Yeah.
Except, except, there's a big except there, big fat asterisk. Put me on the floor at Madison Square Garden at a good show. I'm in heaven,
Yeah.
right? Something about the lights and the music and the sound moving through my body. Like, I don't mind the people. So it's
Yeah.
like
That makes sense. That makes
everybody.
sense, actually. To me, that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense.
So
Yeah.
so it's like with people who are musicians who are pursuing music or pursuing theater or pursuing film, whatever they're any kind of creative person who's out there, the real challenge is to understand your sensory needs and like where they work for you and where they don't, right? So
Hmm.
um some people get really overstimulated by a lot of people talking all the time, right? They get tapped out on like
Hmm.
one of
Yeah.
my teenage daughter says to me, "My social battery is empty. I need to recharge." She needs to go upstairs and like close her door and take a break, right?
Yeah.
So when I work with clients around this stuff, what we really focus on is understanding your sensory system so that you can figure out what you need to feel comfortable and grounded, regardless of what environment you're in, and to have
Right.
awareness around what is a challenge for you and what makes you feel regulated so that you can use those things to find ways to cope with the intensity of life on the road or like life as a touring and performing musician. So the
Yeah.
challenges can be like, sleeping on a bus or in a van is like not easy. You're dealing with other
Yeah.
people's. I was just out for dinner with a friend of mine who's a touring musician, and he was like, "You should smell the bus. It's terrible." Telling us how many days per year he's out on the road and sleeping on the bus. And he's like, he was talking about like, the farting on the bus. Like you don't even think about that, right? As
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
rock and roll life seems so glamorous to those of us that are not like actively in it. And like there's a lot of challenges with smells, with sounds, with
Yeah.
people time, with pressure. And then if you think about the crew, they're in a whole other vat of difficulty because not only do they have to
Yeah,
do their job and manage the stress of their actual job, but then they have to deal with all the personalities. They have to deal with and then there's that extra what I found with my clients that work in the crew, there's this extra little layer of like, I got to keep my job and make sure I get invited on the next run.
yeah, that pressure.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
there's a lot of like trickiness around temperamental personalities that you have to kind of manage. I would think the hardest thing
yeah,
about being on the road is like everybody's a creative and everybody's got their shtick and you got to learn how to like, weave
yeah.
your way through it where you're not upsetting the apple cart. And that's
Which is
challenging.
hard for, the quote unquote normal people. It's
Yeah.
already hard.
Yeah.
So if you then have additional needs
Uh-huh.
or different needs,
Yeah.
it's going to be twice as bad. So, but there's two parts. But there is the figuring out what you need, and then there's the communicating that. So what do you advise there? What are some tips and tricks on and that's true for anybody, right? Anybody listening who just, has a normal job. This is also true for you. Is what are some ways of communicating those needs? Because I wonder if that's sometimes where it breaks down.
Well, yeah, because like nobody wants to ask for support in this country. Like I don't know what it's like in
Uh,
other countries because I've only lived here, but the American way is very much like you can do it on your own. You shouldn't have to ask for help. Like asking for help or support is kind of seen as a weakness. I always tell clients asking for help is a skill.
it is, but it's like, I lived in England for a long time. Like the stiff upper lip is not a
Same thing.
cliche. It's really
Yeah.
true. So,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of cultures where, especially cultures that are more built on individualism versus like community living. I think it's a problem
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, so it's a great question because you said it as communication. How do you communicate those needs? And
Yeah.
one of the things I find all my clients struggle with is the idea that boundaries need to be verbally communicated.
Mm.
Boundaries and what boundaries are, right? So let me just define to keep it level,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Please.
Boundaries are what is okay with you and what is not okay with you.
Right.
People tend to think it's like what you like, what you don't like, but it's really about like your personal values and like what kind of things are okay with you in a relationship with someone and what kind of things are a hard no. And
Right.
you do not really communicate those with words to people. You can, but it's more about enacting
Oh,
them,
that's interesting. It's
right?
living
So,
those boundaries. Yeah.
yeah, because enacting the boundary is where the boundary gets seen.
Hmm.
And people tend to remember things they see better than they remember things they hear for some reason. At least that's
Right.
the joke I share with my clients. Like I make it. Because you could tell I mean, I have actually they're not teenage anymore. And both my kids are college age. And even my
Hmm.
husband, I could tell them 1,000 times what I want them to do for me. But until there's some sort of visual cue or a consequence associated with that impacting our relationship, they're not likely to remember to do it because all of us are just wandering around doing our own thing and thinking about
Right.
ourselves way more than we're thinking about other people. Right. So it's like you have to know your needs and know what you need to function. And I always tell the clients in the music industry in particular, like, you need your needs met so you can perform at the level that everybody wants you to, right? You
Yes.
can't be exhausted because you got shitty sleep on the bus because someone was blaring music the whole night and like it be expected to get on stage and do a show that's like going to knock everybody's socks off. Like if you need quiet and nobody is respecting your ask, your verbal communication about that, then it's on you to get some noise canceling headphones or it's on you to like pull the
Right.
artist card and say I need a hotel room. I can't sleep like this, right? I there's always choices of things that we do that kind of contribute to the problems we experience. So
Yeah.
the with communicating your needs, it's really more about taking care of your own needs and not relying on other people
Yeah.
to do it for you. So I often encourage clients to like have a buddy on tour, someone that's your
Hmm.
person that you agree to be like their support if they need it and vice versa, but just in a way where like if a client tells me that they get really overwhelmed during the setup process because a lot of the time things don't go the way they're supposed to,
Hmm.
So we say, okay, so you're going to people take smoke breaks all the time. You're going to take a 5-minute decompression break. And if you need someone to get you out, go to your buddy and be like, hey, can we go take a 5-minute walk outside? Right.
Yeah.
One of my old client was a tour manager, and like she needed quiet before everybody came into the building to start setting everything up, and people would
Hmm.
try to like talk to her right away when they came in there, and so she just got a pair of noise canceling headphones. She told everybody, if I'm wearing the headphones, that means you can't talk to me.
I like
I'm not
that.
wearing the
That's a
headphones.
visual boundary. Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to communicate your needs to people that don't involve like asking them to help you with something.
I like that because I think for a lot of folks, and as you're, again, as I was listening to you, I caught myself, right, thinking that it's always about what you're asking other people to do, but you have agency.
Yeah.
So if you know what your needs are, it is first of all your responsibility to
Hmm.
make sure that you are meeting your own needs and not just putting it on everybody else.
Yeah.
Because and I'm trying to, and I forget which comedian it was, but he had this bit on um sort of Gen Z specifically, right, where he's like keeps meeting these younger folks who tell him immediately upon meeting all of the things they have, right? This kind of like, oh, I have ADHD and I have this and I have this. And then he's like, okay, and what are you doing about it? And he goes, and then he kind of plays the character going, nothing. I'm just telling you. So you'll work around it. And I think it's just a funny bit, but that was my perception,
Yeah.
kind of how it mostly went. But now that I'm listening to you,
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? That makes way more sense to kind of how early would that need to be brought in though? Because you mentioned your kids, is that idea of you have different needs, but
Hmm.
not you are different, but you
Yeah.
have different needs.
Sure.
How early, ideally, if it's diagnosed or if it's noticed early enough, would that idea of responsibility and you are allowed to take care of yourself first in this society, how early do you think that that's something that needs to be instilled?
I think it has to be from the get-go, but I think it can happen at any time. Like I spend a lot of
Right.
time in this room, like saying to people, you're not that important to other people. Like take care of yourself.
Like, it's not about you. Yeah.
Which is like people really don't like hearing that, but it's a really powerful statement because it's
Especially
true.
creative folks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody is literally walking around just thinking about themselves, but
Right.
then
Everybody has their own stuff.
but
Yeah.
not taking care of their own needs. So to me, it doesn't make sense. I
Mm.
tried really hard to teach my children. Like I also tell people, I'll get back to answer your question, but this is the other thing that you asked for, like tips and tricks. One tip is to remember you're not that important, at least not to other people, but you should be the most important person to yourself.
To yourself. Oh, I
Hmm.
like that a lot.
And
Because as you said, you're not that important. I was like, I've met some artists who probably can't even absorb that message.
yeah, well, there's always those people, right? But the other thing is we always are contributing, whether we're aware of it or not, to the problems that we're experiencing. And so I always encourage my clients to think about what are you doing to maintain the problem? I'm not saying tour manager is not being really dismissive and rude to you, but how are you allowing that to continue? Because it's always two people. Like they say, it takes two to tango, but it doesn't matter if the other person is a complete jerk. You can still change the
Yeah.
situation if you can figure out what you're doing to maintain it, right? So
Yeah.
that would be the other little snippet. And I've tried to instill both of those ideas in my kids since they were really little. Once I figured it out when they were, when I went back to
Yeah. Yeah.
school, because like, let's just be clear, I didn't know any of this stuff before I became a therapist, and I became a therapist at like 40. So
Right.
so if you're listening to this and you're like mind blown by the idea that you could take care of your own needs, it's okay. You're not like tardy to the party. Anybody can make these changes
Yeah. Yeah.
anytime in
Anytime.
their life. And society will challenge you on it. People will say
Yeah.
you're being selfish. People will not like that you're setting boundaries with them at all. People don't like that. They want to be able to tell you what to do and you listen. So,
Is that because, and I don't know this, so correct me if I'm
yeah,
wrong, but is that because they got used to you not having
yeah.
these boundaries are not expressing these needs. And then when you
Yeah.
do, like you said, right, they no longer can just make you do what they want. Now they have to take your needs into account. Is that why that conflict happens?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, we all get into patterns of interaction with the people in our lives
Hmm.
um, that work for a time and then stop working at someone's expense, right? And so
Yeah,
it's just a matter of like shifting the pattern and knowing how to do it in
mm,
a way where your boundaries are intact and your needs are not being crippled by the other person's
by
needs.
the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more thing on the kid aspect of this,
Sure.
because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because you said, like, you want to teach them some of these things as soon as you realize that they might have different needs.
Yeah.
What are some things that parents, like if you have, your kid is talented guitar player or talented singer and they're clearly going to pursue a career that has these additional challenges, what are some things that parents can do with kids that will eventually make their adult lives easier?
That's a really good question. I think it would go back to like, well, first of all, I think parents, like if a kid is expressing, if a kid has talent and they're expressing a desire to pursue a creative endeavor, try not to take that away from them, you know?
Right, of course.
Um, and to make their lives easier, I mean, I think it's the same advice for any parent of any child. Like, teach your child to take care of their own needs, but to be kind and empathetic and understanding and direct and honest and like all the things that we would want any kids to know. With
Yeah,
neurodivergent kids in particular, though, it's about the same thing. I'll go back to the same thing. Like they need to understand where their differences lie and what their sensory needs are. So, in
right.
the neurodivergent community, we usually see differences in three main areas. So it's sensory system. There's differences in the sensory system. There's differences in the way that we perceive the world, and there's
Hmm.
differences in communication styles. So
Oh,
neurodivergent
cool.
folk,
Yeah.
their perception is different, right? Like I told you, things come in, like all the details, everything comes in. Whereas people who are considered more neurotypical, they kind of have a broader,
Have a better filter. Yeah.
not even a, it's not, I don't know if I would say
Or
it's,
is that not the right way of thinking about it?
it's more of like a broad picture, like a broader picture. I mean, I could go into the neuroscience of what happens in the brain with neurodivergent brains versus neurotypical brains, but really people who are neurodivergent, and like you said, it's a blessing and a curse all in one because all the
Right.
stimuli comes in, like so much stimuli that's overwhelming and overstimulating for a lot of people. And
Hmm.
also you notice everything, you see all the things. Whereas people who are
Yeah.
neurotypical, maybe you're right, maybe it is a little bit of a filter, but they just tend to have a broader, like a more broad view of things.
Yeah.
Um, and so, that's the difference there. And also the processing is different, right? People who are considered more neurotypical, they process top down. They'll look at something and be like, oh, that's a tree. And then they'll like from there kind of go down, like, yeah, it's got leaves, it's got a trunk, it's got roots, it's a tree, right? Whereas a
Right.
neurodivergent person might look at a tree and say, okay, it's bottom up processing. It's more noticing all the details first and then coming to the conclusion.
Oh,
Um,
that makes, yeah,
so it's a
that makes
very
sense.
different, like the processing and the perception is really different. Our sensory systems
Yeah,
are more, I like to tell my clients we have more robust sensory systems. There's like more neural endings in the
exactly.
nervous system. So you
Yeah.
feel, your sensory perception can be a little bit like different. And then communication style is different, right? There's just different
Hmm.
ways of communicating. You will find on social media really funny videos about people. There was that whole like song going around like I'm autistic and I am that's why I'm a bitch, right? Like it was like a song that some girl made because there's it's called Milton's double empathy problem that like people who are neurotypical don't necessarily understand what the experience is like to be neurodivergent. Whereas
Hmm.
neurodivergent people have a little bit more understanding of what it's like to be neurotypical because they are
Mm,
so inundated with like, this is what you're supposed to be like.
yeah.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding that happens,
Yeah.
a lot of my clients are told that they're blunt or direct because, or like they can't handle small talk, things like that. They're just differences in
Yeah.
communication. So if you are a parent of a neurodivergent child, it's like highlighting the strengths, acknowledging the challenges, and figuring out early like how to work with them.
Hmm.
And not try to make your child be normal. Like I'm putting air quotes around that because
Yeah.
that's, parenting is hard. It's
Mm.
really hard, no matter what kind of kid you have. And when you have a kid who has extra challenges like that, it's very easy to feel angry and like want them to just fit in and want them to just look like act like everyone else's kid and be that's where
Yeah.
it gets harmful, right? Like so you want to avoid that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because that then I think would enforce that message of you're not how you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
which is the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. I have the not normalizing acceptance.
Yeah, it is. It's being affirming and accepting and like
Right.
supporting agency and rejecting neuronormativity, rejecting the idea that there's some sort of baseline of what normal is and you're not on it. Like that's just a
Yeah,
ridiculous
yeah.
sentiment in general that
Well,
anybody
but
should.
especially if you're a child, like that's
Yeah,
extra hard. Like they
yeah,
don't have the lens through which to
right,
contextualize that.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
let's if we switch to practical tips, right? What we were saying before, of like you have a career, you have a creative career, um, you know, you know what your needs are, you know how to communicate them. All right, we covered that.
yeah.
And now you're recording a new album, so you and your band are going to be locked in a studio for weeks, possibly months, depending on how much money you have. Or it could be just rehearsals for a tour. Right? You're
Right.
in rehearsal. You have 3 weeks of rehearsal before you go on tour. In that specific environment, what are some practical tips that you would give to folks?
Well, I would again, it would be the same tips, right? Like what do you need to feel comfortable in that environment? What when I work with these kinds of clients, I use a model like it's not a model, it's like a methodology, I
Hmm.
guess, where I call it the way in and it's like how do you get in your body and feel okay? So it's what do you need to feel regulated and grounded? Like what makes you feel good? What are things that you can lean on to help you feel grounded if you get dysregulated? And
Right.
then let's pack up those things and bring them with you. And let's think about what could happen. What are some things that could happen over this time period that could theoretically throw you off course? Because there are things that dysregulate you, right?
Right.
So for some clients, that could be boredom, right? They get really bored waiting for the drummer to lay down the tracks, right?
Yeah.
So what are you going to use that time for, right? You're stuck in the studio, but you're not
Mm.
stuck in the studio. If you don't have to really listen or pay attention to what's going on, is there a space in the studio you can utilize? Is there a recording booth that no one's using that'll fit a yoga mat? Do you want to go do like a 20-minute YouTube yoga while you're waiting for the drum
Yeah.
tracks to
Yeah.
be done? Is that a good time to step outside and make a phone call to a loved one to foster that connection and communication?
Yeah.
Um, or perhaps you want to use that time to work on lyrics, like or songwriting. What would fill your cup? What would allow you
Yeah.
this, like when you have those moments of time, like thinking ahead, how do you want to use them? And having like prepared some things to do during those times that the boredom might creep in or like how
Yeah.
are you gonna if you start to notice that you're getting frustrated and angry like because things aren't going the way that you thought they would like
Yeah.
that's a signal for you to take a break. How are you going to communicate to your bandmates that like sometimes you get overstimulated and you need a break, right? That would
Yeah.
be like a verbal communication and then like a buddy system, right? Like kind of thing.
I really like that because you brought it up for tour, and we'll talk about tour more in detail in a bit. But I really like that idea of sort of pairing up with a trusted person
Yeah. Well, everybody
when
has
you.
someone, right? Like everybody usually has someone on tour that they like love or that's their and there's some bands out right now that are super supportive of each other in that way. I find like the younger musicians, they're
Yep.
sober, they like take care of themselves. Like not everybody obviously, but like they really try
Yeah.
to have like they understand the challenges that they're going to face doing what they want to do more so than I would say someone my age did. there was like it was the Wild West when I'm in my 50s when I was growing up, what the music industry
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, right? So
Well, but it wasn't allowed, right?
that's
There's some
true.
things that I'm thinking back because now my brain is like going
Hmm.
trying to find examples, and I remember probably would have been like the mid '80s, I think, when the band Iron Maiden
Mm,
went to their management and I was like, "You are literally killing us.
yeah,
We cannot go. We cannot do the tour at the time you're saying." What did they do? They did the tour.
yeah.
Have you seen the Robbie Williams documentary?
Oh gosh, I don't think so. I'm like bad with the movie.
Required viewing for
Yeah,
anyone. You will throw stuff at the screen, so like surround yourself with like plush toys
yeah.
to throw.
So
Nothing hard. nothing like nothing that's heavy.
sure, sure.
Because there's a scene in there that I actually yelled at the screen when he's at Glastonbury. It's not Glastonbury the festival, but it's the grounds
Mm-hmm.
where it's his own show, headline show, and he is done, and you can tell,
Mm,
right? Where it's like this person is done, and he just has a near breakdown backstage, and whoever from the management team it was, he says, I don't think I can do this. He is saying, I am done. And their response is, well, we can't afford the cancellation insurance, get on stage.
yeah, yeah.
So
I
he
mean,
gets on
and I
stage,
don't.
and what happens is the biggest breakdown of his career in public, on
Yeah.
stage, in front of 200,000 people. It is like, it simply wasn't allowed. And that's something I'm also curious about now that we're talking about this, is the changing attitudes of this that you already touched on. The research is getting better. The communication about this is getting better. The information about this being sent out is getting better, TikTok notwithstanding. The
There's some good stuff on there.
Well, that probably is. Right? And Instagram, I don't want to harp on just one thing. I'm sure
Yeah, yeah,
YouTube, Instagram, right? It's
yeah.
all, there's misinformation everywhere.
Yes.
Is the changing attitudes to this, to mental health in general,
Yeah.
how that is changing and how that is helping newer artists coming up to where like an artist, a really unique artist like a Chapel Roan can just go,
Mm,
nope, I'm in charge and I say no. And everybody's like, okay,
yeah.
that
Well,
didn't used to happen.
I know, but I think the industry was so different back then, like in the
Yeah. Oh,
80s, I look
yeah.
you look at some of the bands that were big in the 80s and you're like, God, they would never get around. I mean, I think about like people like Phil Collins or Peter Gabriel, like the musicianship is like bananas, but like aesthetically, like they wouldn't fly today. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
it's a much prettier, it's kind of like Hollywood and the music industry kind of like mushed together in a lot of ways. You have
Yeah.
to like American Idol and like all these TV shows, like, you had to have a look, right? Like that there was a look in the 80s, but it was just like the
Yeah.
big,
Once MTV happened, it's like, it's not just how you sound anymore.
right.
Right. That
Like
wasn't good
that's really
enough.
shifted too, which is
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know that the music's gotten like better or it's the same, it's like who knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I think that there is a big shift in general. Like I think
Hmm.
especially after the pandemic, people really struggled with like the experience of going through that
Mm.
uh, and it was very scary for a lot of people and very anxiety provoking for a lot of people and very depressing for a lot of people, so there was a
Yeah.
big kind of push for therapy, to normalize it and to like put it out as an option that people could access, and then you couple that with all of these, they're actually terrible for the industry, for the mental health industry, but there's all these companies, I don't know if you're aware of this, that are out there now that are selling mental health services at a profit, right? They're venture capitalists like BetterHelp. And it's very unethical, a lot of the stuff that goes on with these companies. I think social media has really kind of brought it to the forefront. Like you said, there's so much information
Mm.
on social media about mental health, and not all of
Yeah.
it's accurate. Um, and there's a lot of therapists on there spouting stuff that's not accurate in a sense. But the truth is, there's no real answer. There's no definitive truth. It
Right.
goes again back to biodiversity. I work from a biopsychosocial model, meaning all those biology, psychology, sociology, it all blends together in terms of like what makes a human. And so,
Yeah.
because everybody is so different, the, there's not one like answer for everybody's ailments, if you right? And not
Yeah,
every
that
therapist
makes
is
sense.
great for every client. And like you were
Hmm.
saying earlier when we were talking about like having a therapist that has lived experience that you also have, some people find that valuable, some people don't. Some people like a therapist who's going to call them out on their shit. Other people like to go to therapy where they just get validated the whole time. And there's a
Right.
million modalities and trainings and things that anybody can access and teach and use with their clients. And so, I just like to come from this place where it's like you have to be able to work. My field, we meet the client where they're at and we help them what they want to work on. We're
Right.
not, um, we're not just like saying, "Oh, this is the one thing I know how to do, and this is the answer to all your problems." Right?
Right. The hammer nail thing.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So I think all of that combined, I kind of went off track there. Sorry, but all of that combined
No,
is
that I steered us off track. It's fine.
but that's why I think these artists are feeling more confident to speak up. They're recognizing that they have a platform, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing a lot more of that, where artists are speaking out about things like mental health, about how important it
Yeah.
is to take care of yourself, about their sobriety. That's been a big one
Hmm.
too, because alcohol
That's
is,
been really interesting in
it is,
general. Like Gen
yeah.
Z, like younger generations, just being like, we're not interested.
Yeah, they're complete. Well, and again, I think a lot of that comes from these people that they grew up watching and knowing have
Yeah.
publicly come out and said, "Yeah, I was using and it wasn't good." You go back to the
Yeah.
70s and the 80s and it's because it was such a pressured environment. So, it's good to see that more artists are kind of taking mental health more seriously. Like we've heard recently that like bands are putting it into their budgets to have services for their people, to access when they're on tour. Like that's huge. And then you have people like
Mm.
Jonah Hill making a movie about him and his therapist, or other people
Yeah.
talking about their experiences in therapy more publicly. So I think all of that lends to more awareness, more accessibility, more people willing to try it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The thing you just said about folks putting it in their budget, right? Not just for the band, I'm assuming, but also the crew.
Hmm.
Of here, as we are budgeting for our tour, here is X amount of dollars set aside for mental health services if and when somebody needs it.
Yeah.
So we did practical tips for studio environments where the
Yeah.
main two things that I've seen with artists is the boredom and just the conflict that comes up when
Yeah.
somebody can't get it right or it doesn't sound quite good or the engineer's not getting it and conflict arises. Those are
Mhm.
like the two things, boredom and conflict.
Yeah.
What about on the road? Right? When people are actually going on tour, because now everything is so much worse. You're in this absolute bubble.
Yeah.
You're sometimes on a bus, maybe in a van, depending on what level your band is at. You're constantly in a different place. What are some of the unique challenges on tour for folks? And then again, what are practical tips?
Yeah, it's like the same stuff, right? It's like understand what your needs are. Like, what do you need to do to feel comfortable in that environment? And then figure out how to make it happen for yourself.
Mm.
You know, again,
But
on
it
the,
does feel like on tour, there's less of that possible, right? Because people have an idea of, artists like controlling everything, but
Mhm.
nothing is further from the truth. Like you often control very little when
Yeah,
you're on the road.
yeah.
So how does that create different challenges where it's not as easy as just say, know what you need and make it happen? What is more unique about the making it happen on the
Well,
road versus any other time in their lives?
I think it's just the intensity of it is higher,
Mm.
and it's like if you're doing a tour, I was talking to this friend of mine, they were doing like 15 shows in 18 days. They were on the bus every night, right? Like just place to
Oh,
place, like no breaks. They had like 2 days off in the whole run and whatnot, things like that.
when
Um,
I'm assuming they were travel days, so they were not even real
yeah,
days off.
yeah, they know they
Yeah,
weren't, and they were probably still stuck on the bus if I had to guess, right? So,
right.
um, in those environments, it's just a little bit more prep work. It's about making sure you've got tools in your toolbox that you can access when you're there, and not using downtime to use substance, right? Or like
Yeah.
really kind of
Or
actively,
maybe knowing when you are most tempted to do that, and then again, maybe with that buddy system, trying to preempt,
yeah,
oh, I know tomorrow's a travel day, or when we finish this a string of 3 dates and
Yeah.
then I have an actual day off where it's not a travel day, it's a
Yeah.
real day off, like then I'm tempted. Is that something that could help?
I mean, it could, but what I recommend with clients, like in the scenario you just described, the one part we didn't talk about was recovery time. So,
Mm,
what's really necessary across the board, with anyone who struggles with overstimulation and overwhelm with their life, right? Is knowing how to self-soothe, right? Knowing what helps you stay grounded
yeah,
and like avoiding the things that really dysregulate you, and then using those things when you're in the moment, and then on the back end, planning a recovery day. I call it padding, right?
mm,
You want to pad both ends of whenever you're going out on tour. So like if you're leaving to go on tour on a Monday, the Monday before, you start building in time for yourself to get into like your best space, right? And you
yeah,
go to the store and you buy all the food that you know you're going to want to eat on tour that you might not have access to. And you make sure your noise
yeah,
canceling headphones are supercharged. And maybe you buy a white noise machine to play in the hotel and you purchase an eye mask, right? Like
yeah,
whatever it is the because people get super dysregulated in my experience, just in general. Lack of sleep, not having good food, and not having time alone, I would say are the three
yeah,
biggest stressors to people who have sensitive nervous systems. And so it's really about being super proactive and making sure that you're bringing everything that you could possibly bring with you to try to help you keep your cool like the whole time.
yeah,
And then making sure that when you have a day off in the middle or when you come home, that you plan for I call it like a low input day and a padded day. So
hmm,
like I'm just thinking of a client of mine who's in like the music scene and also in the filming of the music scene kind of space where they
hmm,
go also on like a 4-day festival shooting and streaming and whatever, and then it's over. Come home. No plans with anybody else. Complete alone time, right? Because this
yeah,
person likes alone time. Schedule a massage. Your body's going to be hurting after working for 4 days. If you can afford it, schedule a little massage action. Or if you can't afford it, go to the nail salon and get a massage, right? Like just find a way
yeah,
to
yeah,
treat yourself to like your favorite food that you haven't been able to eat for a couple of days. And
hmm,
like maybe do a yoga class if that's what you like, right? Like the question I ask clients is like, how do you refill your cup? You're going into this thing, you know your cup
yeah,
is going to get drained. How do you keep it from spilling over the first day, right? With the things that you know you need, you make sure you get those things. And then
yeah.
how do you refill it when you get home? Because it's really, I mean, even in like
I
the
like
gen
that.
pop world, not the music world, like I had a client once who um, really struggled because she would wake up in the morning and like get her kids off to school, and then she'd come home and want to take a nap. And she felt all this intense shame around wanting to take a nap.
Mm,
And she was really, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't, I'm so tired after all of that hullabaloo. And I don't know. And she could take a nap. Her job didn't start till later in the day. Like she totally could take a
right,
nap.
right, right.
But it was all this societal construct that was like making her feel like she couldn't do it. And I said to her, why can't you take a nap? That's a lot of stimulation. Getting two kids dressed and out of the house in the morning. Anyone who's listening who's a parent knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's a lot.
Hmm.
So if you need to take a nap after to make sure that you're good for the rest of the day, you're like, take a nap, right? And so it's like that. It's really kind of, I call it like rejecting neuronormativity. Like, and people in the music industry are really good at this. We're all rebels at heart, right? We all just want to like rock the system and like do the thing, right? So it's like,
True.
It's embracing that you have parts of you that are not like everybody else's parts and owning it, right? And being able to say, like, hey,
Yeah.
I know that I'm supposed to be, finishing up the lights right now, but I just got screamed at by the tour manager and someone moved the riser again. So, like, I'm going outside for 5 minutes. I will be back and I will do my job better because I got those 5 minutes, you know?
Because you got that, yeah, because you took that break. So
Yeah.
as you were talking about this, the word that came up for me is acceptance. Again, because I said it before too. That is like the example you gave of the lady who does the morning routine and then just needs like a 20-minute power nap.
Yeah.
The she knew what she needed,
Hmm.
but she couldn't accept that that was, or maybe felt that it wasn't acceptable to
Yeah.
need that. So
Yeah.
she denied herself the thing she needed.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I do think that that has been changing a little, because even the way that folks are talking about this, it's less and less. I don't hear anybody talking about curing ADHD anymore,
Well,
right?
you
And
can't
maybe they
cure it.
say treat. Well, exactly. You can't do it in the first
There's
place, but it
nothing to
became this thing
cure.
of like,
Yeah.
the language of curing is kind of gone.
Yeah.
The language of treatment, I feel, is also like starting to go, and it's all in place of accommodation and acceptance,
Yeah.
which ultimately I think is what's, as I listen to you and you're making me smarter about this, is kind of what's needed. That it's just accommodation and acceptance, and not you're not correct, you need to be like this, but it's
Right.
just, this is just your reality, and we're going to work with that.
Yeah. I mean, in your own experience as a human being, like, can you think about where you've done the same thing? Like, where you've kind of not met your own needs because you were
Oh,
accommodating, right? Like
100%.
you thought you were accommodating some norm or some idea like of what's supposed to
Yeah.
be, right? I mean, it's a fairly human experience, and like, yes, we need to move away from that. We need to move away from this idea that taking care of your own needs is selfish. It makes you
I,
weaker when you don't fulfill your own needs. It makes you less communicative, less available for community and connection. And I think
yeah.
bigger picture thing is, like you said, the British stiff upper lip, the American like independent way has really done us a disservice because as
Mm,
humans, we're supposed to live in community with each other. We're supposed to be helping each other and accommodating each other and
yeah.
supporting each other. And if you find yourself struggling with anxiety, typically is the first symbol like of like something's not working, right? There's a lot of
Right.
overstimulation, overwhelm, and then that becomes unbearable, and then we fall into like more of depression feelings, right?
Yeah.
And you are one of these people, like you have to kind of check yourself for a second and say like, hey, wait, I might need some help around this because clearly I don't know what my needs are. Most people are not really aware of what their sensory needs are. They don't know.
Mm.
We know
I
something.
often, yeah, but I often find, and if you ask people, it's sort of, maybe it's a quirk of our brain, but if you ask people what they want, they'll tell you what they don't want. If you ask them what they need, they'll tell you what they don't need. Um, and I wonder
Those are,
if that's
yeah.
why.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I asked you, like, do you have any sensory things, smell, taste, touch, sound, body, like balance stuff, or like knowing when you need to drink or
I,
eat or pee, like any of those things that like come to mind that you struggle with?
I always, there's a reason I'm holding a pen.
Okay. So you're
Like, I
always,
usually always have something
so
to
you have
play
some
with.
tactile need, right? Like it suits
Yeah.
you to hold the pen. Yeah. So that's a great one. But like, do you know any other ones?
Oh, now I'm going to be thinking about that.
Yeah. Because we don't typically think about it. And for a lot of us, this
Until it's a problem.
until
Yeah.
it's a problem. But what's so fascinating, which I found through like doing this kind of work, people will tell me like, I don't have any problem with anything. I mean, I did when I was a kid, but I don't have it anymore. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not a thing.
They
Sensory
just
needs,
learned how to
you
not
just learned how to
notice. Yeah.
mask, and like you keep coming in here
Yeah.
telling me you're going from 0 to 100 and you don't know why. Like maybe it's because you keep wearing tight pants and you don't like wearing tight pants, like
Mm.
or maybe it's because you're not listening to your body when it wants to eat chocolate. I don't, it could be a
Yeah.
million
Yeah.
things, but we have to, as in general, like humans, we should be aware of what feels good and doesn't feel good and be comfortable like
Yeah.
meeting those needs so that we can present in our best selves and be the best
Yeah.
partners and friends and community members that we can be, right? So,
Okay. I like that. I like that. That's a good way to end. Where can people find you? Like, if folks want to read up more about what you do, or if they are based in Connecticut,
oh,
and they want to take in a therapy session,
oh yeah.
where can people find you?
Therapy session, you can find me in my group practice, which is called Whole Soul Counseling. We are based in Connecticut. We do virtual work in Connecticut, New York, and Vermont.
Okay.
My teaching stuff, my educational stuff, I run trainings from time to time on explaining how to be a neurodivergent affirming therapist. So that would be on my educational platform, which is called Rachel Runes Therapy. Um,
Okay, now I was going to end, but now I need to dig into that. So, where did the Rachel Ruins Therapy brand come from? What's behind that?
it's a great question. I was feeling kind of cheeky. I'm very sarcastic and I love to laugh. Like my clients, when I first meet them, I always tell them, like, if you come in here for a session and I can't make you laugh once in that 55 minutes, like I feel like I've failed, you know? I don't care
Right,
how heavy the session is, like it shouldn't be that it should still be fun, right? We should still be able to
right,
laugh at stuff. So I'm a very sarcastic, I like to make people laugh kind of person. And so I'm ruining therapy in the sense that, like, I'm going to point out this big gaping hole in your theory about whatever you think is going on with your client because you are not acknowledging that it could potentially be neurodivergency because you're stuck in this old paradigm that is actually not
okay,
true.
I see. Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's really where it comes from because a lot of therapists rely way too heavily on that DSM. They're pathologizing their clients left, right, and center, or they're treating them for things and not recognizing that like, they're saying, oh, you have anxiety disorder. So we're going to just work on your anxiety and you can work on or you have trauma, right? Trauma is a big one. If you're neurodivergent, you inherently experience trauma as a child growing up.
that
You were
makes
asking
sense.
me earlier about like kids,
Yeah,
right? Like it's
yeah,
inherent in being neurodivergent. There's inherent trauma with that because even if your parents are wonderful, you're still going to school and knowing that you're not like everybody else. So
right,
but a lot of clinicians get stuck, you know, trying to process through the trauma, but the client's still having anxiety, the client's still getting depressed, the client's still not feeling like they can have, authentic relationships. And it's because underneath that is this thing that no one's looking at it. So I'm ruining
right.
therapy by pointing out you're missing like a big part of the picture. That's where it came from. So if that sounds like up your alley and you're a rebel like me and you want to dismantle and change and be more accepting and affirming and non-pathologizing, you can find me on my website, which is rachelruinstherapy.com. So
All
that's
right.
where that is. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Your time and kind of setting me straight on some misconceptions that I had.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're not really misconceptions. I wouldn't put it that way. I would just, not maybe not complete information. And again, like
Right.
everything out there is subjective. I always say like I don't really know if what I think is true is actually true either, right? This is just my
Mm,
experience and my what I've learned and what I know and I like curiosity, so I'm always open to the idea that there could be something new to learn there, right? So,
yeah. There's always room to get smarter is
yeah.
one of my one of the things that I say a lot. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate your time. And
Yeah,
everybody
no
else,
no
subscribe, leave a
problem.
comment, leave a review. It really helps the show grow. So thank you so much.